So, and I'll tell you the other thing too. With respect to, his time, that as the sheriff, I think that you're compensated very well. So you owe it to the people to tell them what your schedule is, okay? And that's one of the things that I'll do, is that weekly tabulations will be done. You'll be able to see. I have no problem with Kevin Larkin if he has to go to an event representing the sheriff's office on a Saturday night. Absolutely, that should be on sheriff's time, but there should be a documentation of that. And, quite frankly, but that event doesn't equate to going to check IDs down at a bar in Point Pleasant. And again, I'll tell you right now, from the liability standpoint, it just doesn't make any sense whatsoever from a logical thinking standpoint that you have a member, the chief executive officer of the sheriff's department, is going down to check IDs. If you think about how much he's lowering the value of that position of sheriff. He's the only sheriff that does this type of work of the 21 that are in New Jersey. And I can tell you right now, his two predecessors didn't sit as a security guard at the Kingsbury, nor did they sit at a bar in Point Pleasant checking IDs.
Can you say what the salary is for the sheriff's position at this point?
I'm not sure what it is. It's not one of my overriding reasons for doing this, but I can tell you right now, I think it's about $125,000. So, and I'll tell you the other thing. From a labor standpoint, I'm a pro-labor person. 10 years as a manager in the state police, never had a complaint against me by a civilian or an enlisted member of the state police. I think that the union people should be the ones that are getting these jobs and not the sheriff. There's other ways that the sheriff, in Hamilton for instance here, deputy chiefs, captains, and the chief are ineligible for overtime. There's reasons why departments do that. They want the lower ranking people to do these jobs. And lastly, along that line is that the peers of Kevin are working different type jobs. You can go out and get your education and be an adjunct professor at a college. You can be a security advisor, something that doesn't play into the fact that you're taken away from, the union standpoint, number one, but you're also not lessening the position, also number two, which is most important. And the liability, which is the overriding reason throughout all of this. Yes, Mayor.
You mentioned that let's see, it talks about he's using a county vehicle to travel to and from Ocean County. Are you pretty sure that he's actually using the county vehicle for that? Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay.
And I would ask you if...
We've done a lot of stories with other police officers. They apparently have to have their vehicles in case there's an emergency where they have to come back. Is always what, they responded to us. How would you respond?
And I agree with that. And having been a member of the state police and a captain and being on call 24/7, I 100% agree with that. But I wasn't working over in Pennsylvania as a security guard at the Quaker Bridge Mall or at a bar in Pennsylvania. There's a big difference. If Kevin Larkin, I wouldn't have a word said out of my mouth if Kevin Larkin was out to dinner with his family or friends and using that vehicle, because in the event that that emergency took place and he had to drive back to be at that incident, I'm in 100% agreement with that. But I definitely don't think that Kevin Larkin has to be going to a bar in Ocean County and driving that vehicle to make, whatever, 8 hours at $25 an hour. I don't know what the pay scale is. But the bottom line is there's also other questions that, need to be addressed from an investigative standpoint, is that you have an undersheriff who schedules overtime, okay? That's job is to schedule overtime. Now, take that back to the state police. When I was saying earlier, we have people who we build in their salaries into that money that isn't for construction jobs on 195 or DWI patrols. We build in those salaries so that the taxpayers of New Jersey are not picking up the tab for this. I don't even know how these jobs are solicited into the sheriff's department and who has the final say. Does Jim McSorley just walk into the sheriff and say, hey, Sheriff, I got a job, a friend of mine's a manager over at Acme, and he could use a guy every Friday and Saturday night from, 6 to 2 a.m. And the sheriff, he's the guy who says, okay, no problem, work that, The bottom line is, I think there's got to be some sort of check-off system with respect to alerting the freeholders, alerting the county executive, and I challenge every one of those freeholders who, that if they're aware of this, then they're putting the county at a very high liability standard, especially in that Point Pleasant job. But most, the other thing too, there's 3 levels of a police officer that you can get yourself really jammed up with: nonfeasance, misfeasance, and malfeasance. And I would venture to say that there's very small chance that Kevin Larkin is sitting at the Kingsbury and he's not witnessing any crime taking place at those 2 Kingsbury towers, east and west, on a regular basis. So, and the other thing too, the bottom line is, without the accurate account of his time as a captain, former captain in the state police, I could never build my schedule in advance to come into my assistant bureau chief and say, "Hey Don, listen, I'm taking every Friday off because I want to go see my daughter play soccer. Okay, so I'll be off at 3 o'clock because I want to go over to Notre Dame and watch her play soccer." He would look at me and say, "Hey, we both came into state police at the same time. You're only 1 rank above me. Let's work with this as a little bit of thing." I don't understand how this man can, know that nothing's going to go on, that he can predetermine twice a week, minimum, that he's able to leave that courthouse without the building being secured. We had a rule in the state police that I intend to implement as the sheriff. And it's an excellent rule for the safety of the police officer. In this case, it used to be the trooper, is that you have to have 6 hours on and off before a detail. So the bottom line is that I don't know who else is working over there from the sheriff's department, but I would say from a personal safety standpoint, it's a safety issue. If I have another sheriff's officer relieving Kevin Larkin at midnight on Wednesday morning, and then working till 8 o'clock in the morning, and then going to do a shift standing in court from the standpoint there. And I don't know who's doing that or not, but I can tell you this much. You have a big role as the sheriff, and you should take that role seriously, and that should be your #1 priority. And anything else should be secondary, not the fact that you're scheduling, 104 gigs or side jobs built in right to the year, when it starts in January. It's just not fair. It's unethical, and it's improper management. And on top of that, who's managing the department in that window of time from 4 o'clock until 5:30 when the last sheriff's officers are leaving, with the exception of the communications personnel?